Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our series, Cultivating Compassion in Parenthood, Nurturing Yourself, Your Partner, and Your Children. Today, we're diving into the topic that's incredibly close to my heart, which is practicing self-compassion as a parent. Hi there! If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children, so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Last time we talked about the basics of compassion, so if you need to, please feel free to go back to the previous episode because we talk about why it's so important to be compassionate in parenthood specifically. Today, we're going to focus on how we can be kinder to ourselves. Because like I said last time, if we don't learn to practice self-compassion, our compassionate approach for others is not always expressed with the kind intention that we have at heart. When we're not able to be kind to ourselves, we may be saying all the right things, but a part of us will not be able to truly reflect the kindness that we want to put out there for our partner, for our children, for everyone. So it's really important that we turn inward and we start to treat ourselves with compassion first. So settle in, get comfortable, get yourself a coffee, and let's have a heartfelt conversation about self-compassion. Let's start with understanding what self-compassion really means. The core definition doesn't change, but when we're talking about self-compassion, it might be easier to frame it in the sense of treating ourselves with the same kindness and concern and support that we offer our good friends. And I say friends because a lot of times we don't treat our partners with that same compassion because we have more expectations of them, because we need more of them, because we see more of them. There's much more tension and we might not be able to show up with that same compassion toward our partners. So keep in mind, how kind would you be to a friend who is struggling? Compassion is about recognizing that you're only human and that it's okay to have flaws and to make mistakes. Self-compassion involves three components: self-kindness, understanding the human experience, and mindfulness. The first one, self-kindness, is being gentle and understanding yourself rather than being harshly critical. Understanding the human experience is recognizing that everyone makes mistakes and experiences difficulties, and that you're not alone in your struggles. You can't be alone. And finally, mindfulness is being aware of your feelings and thoughts without judgment and not over-identifying with them, being in the moment, allowing yourself to feel the feeling, but not necessarily attaching any meaning to it or attaching any trait. Now let's talk about some of the common challenges to practicing self-compassion. As parents, we often face a lot of pressure to be perfect. Society will bombard us with images of flawless parenting, and it's easy to feel like we're falling short. There are so many things that we have to do, so many ways that we can get it wrong. Perfectionism is one of the biggest barriers to self-compassion. We set incredibly high standards for ourselves, and when we inevitably fail to meet them, we're our own harshest critics. If we really break it down, though, sometimes we do meet these high standards, but even then, there are other points of view that say that this wasn't the ideal. And I'm saying this because it might help you in your process of letting go of the perfection of trying to get things just right, the way that the book says, the way that that seemingly perfect mom on Instagram says it should and could work. It's important to remember that perfection is an illusion and that we're bound to be imperfect because perfection is the way that they say about beauty. Perfection is in the eye of the beholder. What you may find perfect, I might see as not ideal. And while some things seem to be universally accepted right now, they aren't by everyone and not by all generations. Let me pick an example. Gentle parenting. Our generation will really appreciate and admire a parent who seems to be very calm and able to be a gentle parent at all times. But think of the previous generation. Do you know how many times I've heard people of the boomer generation and even some of the early millennials say that kids are being coddled, because of gentle parenting, that they consider gentle parenting as having no boundaries. And even if you explain to them that gentle parenting is not about not having boundaries, you do, but it's the way that you approach it, they stop you. They're not listening. And so while you may be doing something that for a lot of people may seem perfect, it isn't for everyone. And then that becomes an existential question. Is it really perfect if not everyone thinks it is? Is perfection objective? And if it isn't, is it really perfection? Now, I don't want to turn this into a philosophical discussion, but a lot of us, even if we think what we're doing is perfect, and if we are saying that, oh, okay, I'll only take the opinions of people I'm in tune with and I admire, we are still going to be affected by those critical eyes. And when our toddler, for example, starts to act out or looks a little bit entitled or whatever, thoughts are going to start creeping in. Oh my God, were they right? Have I not set boundaries? Was the fact that I was gentle parenting an issue? Maybe it was. So there's no way to get it perfect. Then guilt is another major challenge to practicing self-compassion. We often feel guilty for not spending enough time with our kids, for losing our temper, or for taking time for ourselves. But guilt is not productive. It doesn't help us improve, and it only makes us feel worse. Undealt with, guilt turns into shame. And what shame does is that it holds us stuck in one place. We feel awful about who we were in a moment. And though it may not be very conscious, what we're doing is we're looking into the past and hoping we could go back and fix it. Logically, we know that this is not possible. But what shame does is it says, you've done something awful. You're an awful person. This defines you now. And if you don't go back and fix it, this is your identity from now on. It makes something permanent, and it makes the solution unattainable because it's in the past and you can't go back. So it's really important to rid ourselves of the guilt and the shame. They're there for a reason. Like I said before, all feelings have a reason for being there. They have something to teach us. They have an alert, but they're not meant to put us in a spiral where we're stuck and paralyzed from doing something else, from extending a helping hand and a forgiving hand toward ourselves. Then, of course, another barrier is society and its expectations. I kind of alluded to that when I was talking about perfection. There's a lot of pressure to do everything right. And that can be from breastfeeding to sleep training to educational activities. It is important to filter out the external pressures, to understand that there are so many opinions, and to focus on what's best for you and your family. So then, how do we practice self-compassion? How do we step forward and push through all of these barriers? Here are some techniques. The first step would be to create tiny opportunities for self-connection within the day. That could be lighting a candle or taking just a couple of minutes to enjoy our coffee while it's still warm, taking a small walk. So maybe you're tired and you don't want to be taking the dog out, but could that be something that allows you to release? Could that be an opportunity to be with yourself in the morning before you get into everything and you can be mindful of your surroundings, of your walking? This can be a mindfulness exercise all in itself. You could be spending a few minutes reading a book. I know you might want to read the whole chapter. You might want to read the whole book in one sitting. That's not possible, but it is going to make a difference to read just a few pages. And to help you with this, I also have the Self-Connect calendar, which offers even more suggestions like that. It's a 31-day calendar. It has tiny moments for self-connection in a day and affirmations, quotes, mantras you can use to give you inspiration. And it's nothing like those self-care guides that will tell you to do a million things and will completely disregard the fact that you are a parent, even if they were written with you in mind as a parent. No, this is quite practical, quite in tune with the difficulty that we all face as parents. And it's not meant to be a strict guide of what you have to follow in a day, but it does offer some alternatives, and you could go ahead and do the thing that's presented in each specific day, Or you could try some of these things out if you haven't before and see what sticks, and then be able from that moment moving forward to know that these 5 things are ways that I can connect to myself and feel better and feel fulfilled, even though they take up very little time and effort on my end. The next thing that you can do is to prioritize sleep. And I say this with a lot of care, knowing that for a lot of our listeners, this is not actually possible if your kid is not sleeping through the night. I didn't sleep almost at all the first couple of years. And when I say at all, I actually mean it. My son would wake up 3 to 4 times every night, and each waking lasted an hour and a half. So you can imagine that I didn't really sleep. I probably had 20 to 30 minutes in between each waking. And you can understand that interrupted sleep that adds up to 4 hours isn't really sleep. For those of us who are at a point where we could be getting more sleep, even if it's slightly interrupted, but what happens is that we are very overwhelmed and we've been very overstimulated all day, and we have this urge to watch TV for endless hours or to pick up our phone and scroll before we go to bed, and then we find that it's been an hour and a half. For those of us, it is really important to be mindful of the time that we spend in order to cool off and to take a little bit of that time and give it back to sleep. Sleep is so crucial to our well-being. Lack of sleep, and I probably should dedicate a full episode to that, lack of sleep can really mess with our emotional state. And it can also mess with our mental state, the way that we think. And what's really interesting and to an extent frightening is that we think a certain way when we are sleepless for a long time. And we don't realize that this is not rational thinking. We don't realize that it's because we're sleepless that we think this way. And those thoughts become our reality until we finally get some sleep and we become human again. And we understand that this was not us thinking. This was an overly exhausted and run down brain that was in no way fully conscious or able to process things in a calm, collected manner. Then it becomes really important to challenge our negative thoughts. Stats say that we have 50 to 60,000 thoughts per minute. The same research will tell you that most of these thoughts are negative and they're repetitive. So when you catch yourself having a negative thought, challenge it. Don't just let it go. Acknowledge that it's there, but also ask yourself if you would say the same thing to a friend. And if not, reframe the thought in a kinder way. Respond to your negative thought as you would respond to a friend who had just shared it with you about herself. It is important that you do this every time. It makes a difference. Think about it. 50 to 60,000 thoughts, and most of them are negative. If we want to build self-compassion, we need to be disputing these thoughts. We need to be taking care of our brain and feeding it with the right foods, in this case, with more positive self-talk. Although I'm not the biggest fan and they don't necessarily work on me, for a lot of people, affirmations can do the trick in this sense. They can reinforce a positive mindset. For example, you can say, I'm doing my best and that's enough. Or, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm learning and I'm growing. Moving on, setting realistic goals for yourself and your family is also going to be setting up the foundations for compassion. Understand that it's okay to have had a certain image of how you wanted things to go, certain expectations of how you wanted the family to run, of how you wanted yourself to be as a parent, of how things should have gone back to normal, and to be okay with adjusting that image, so that this adjustment does not seem like failure and having to just start something new because you failed. So it's all about mindset, to not see it as, oh, I couldn't achieve that high standard that I wanted, so now I have to make do with what I've got and what I'm able to do. But to see it as a way of, here's what life dealt me. Here is how I changed as I stepped into parenthood and how my needs are different. And let's work from that and see what makes us happy in the now and with these givens. Celebrate your achievements, no matter how small. Recognize and appreciate the effort that you're putting into being a parent. And don't undermine the things that make you happy just because you were supposed to have a different outcome. you had planned for and you were expecting something else as the ideal. Finally, it will really help to incorporate mindfulness practices like we said before when we were talking about self-connecting. You can practice mindful breathing by taking a few deep breaths and focusing on the sensation of the air entering and leaving your body. This can also help you ground yourself and bring you to the present moment. But you could also do a body scan type of meditation where you focus on each part of your body and you notice the tension and the discomfort. And then you consciously relax those areas. And you imagine light coming into the area, making it warm and taking the space of dark clouds that are dissolving and are leaving your body. And here are 3 more practical things that you could do. One of them is setting boundaries. That is a big act of self-compassion. It's about recognizing your limits and communicating them to others without shame, unapologetically. For example, if you need quiet time after a long day, let your family know. It's okay to say no to additional responsibilities if you're feeling overwhelmed. It's okay to understand and feel for your partner when they're tired, but to also say, I do need these 15, 30, 45 minutes to myself, however long. Another important aspect of self-compassion is seeking support. It's okay to reach out to a support group, to family, to friends, to ask for help. A lot of times we associate asking for help in parenthood as failing. There is a lot of guilt and shame involved in asking for support and struggling emotionally if we are not necessarily having postpartum depression. You don't have to get to that point in order to ask for someone to give you a hand, to help you find yourself and find fulfillment in parenthood and develop self-compassion. Finally, forgiving yourself is a crucial part of self-compassion. We all make mistakes, and it's important to let go of the guilt and the self-blame. When you find yourself dwelling on past mistakes, remind yourself that you did your best you could with the knowledge and the resources you had at the time. When you become overly critical because things didn't turn out the way that you wanted, let that go. It's okay. When you realize that before you were a parent, you probably were very judgmental and were intent on doing things a particular way, and now you see that you're in quite a similar boat as the other parents were, it's okay. No reason to feel guilt and shame about that. Let it go. Now you can be more compassionate toward yourself and toward others. To wrap up, self-compassion is about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we offer to others. It's recognizing that we are human and that it's okay to make mistakes and that we deserve care and support. If you're going to journal, I want you to pick one of the suggestions that I made, whether that be the self-connect calendar, whether it be a meditation with a body scan or mindful breathing, whether it's taking a walk, practicing self-forgiveness. Take one of these and write how you're going to be implementing it in your journal. Next time, we'll dive into the topic of fostering compassionate communication with our partners. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with other parents who might benefit from it. And don't forget to tune in to our next episode on compassionate communication. I can't wait to see you there. Until then, take care and be kind to yourself. You're doing an amazing job.